For the first time, astronomers have found evidence of an open star cluster being torn apart by our galaxy. And to understand what this means, we need to go right back to how stars form in the first place. Inside of a galaxy, you will have lots of gas and dust sitting around in places called nebulae. Eventually, these nebulae will get so cold that gravity takes over and pulls everything down, and it will fracture up and start making lots of stars. Now, these stars forming out of the nebula are all kind of neighbors, siblings to each other, and they'll all be gravitationally bound into one group. And once all of the material of the nebula has been used up and you're only left with the remaining stars, you have something known as an open cluster. So this is a cluster of stars that formed out of the same nebula, and they're all loosely gravitationally bound. Now, the amount of mass in the nebula and the amount of stars that you create kind of determines the lifetime of this open cluster, because we've always suspected that these open clusters would be torn apart as time goes on. And the number of stars determines the amount of mass, which therefore means the amount of gravity holding the system together. So the more gravity you have, the more resistant it is to the galaxy tugging on it. Over time, these open clusters will be tugged and pulled by the tidal forces of the parent galaxy, and the stars dispersed throughout the galaxy. But this hadn't been observed until very recently. So two independent research groups using data from the GAIA Space Telescope have found two tidal tails coming from a nearby open cluster called the Hyades open cluster, which contains about 500 known stars. Now, these tidal tails can extend up to 650 light years from the Hyades cluster, and with these tails we can actually trace back where these stars have come from in the Hyades cluster. And this is a very powerful probe into a few different things, such as the breakdown of clusterings of stars, which is very useful for understanding how stars get dispersed throughout a galaxy. And it could also be used as a probe to measure the mass of our galaxy. Because if you have an idea of how many stars and how much mass is within this Hyades open cluster, then you would have an idea of how much force the galaxy needs to be applying to this open cluster to break it down, to spread out the stars. So this is the first time it's been observed, and it's probably only possible due to the immense precision afforded to astronomers with the GAIA Space Telescope. And I'm sure there'll be lots more research that goes on into understanding how these tidal tails have formed and how they'll interact with the rest of the galaxy. But it's a really cool step into understanding the life cycle of the stars, how they start out in the open clusters, and now we're getting a picture of how they get pulled out of the open clusters and dispersed throughout the galaxy.